Well, it was a disappointing season for the Halos to say the least, so let's go over the good, the bad, and the downright ugly.
So let's get into it. I've already done a video on this man right here, Shohei Ohtani, on why he should be the MVP, even over Aaron Judge, who's had a phenomenal season. What Ohtani did again, he improved on last year. He's everything that was advertised when he came to us in 2018. Not much more to say about him that hasn't already been said. 273 average, 34 home runs, just shy of 100 RBIs, and his pitching stats, if he had a little more help, he would have had 100 RBIs, and I do think he should be at least a top 3 in Cy Young. What else can you say? He's a dominant ace, and he's our second best hitter. Now it's time to talk about the other MVP, the 3-time MVP on the Angels, Mike Trout. Despite dealing with back problem that had him sidelined for over 40 games, and even having to tell the media that his career wasn't over, he came back big. In his last 30 games, he hit 308 with 12 homers. Trout really showed that there's no doubt that he's still at his prime, and he's still one of the best players, if not the best player when healthy in this game, at least hitting-wise. Trout didn't really take a step back. He had a few struggles early on, but after that back issue, he came back healthy, and he was hitting hot. He even was one shy of an all-time MLB record, but broke the Angel record for home runs in consecutive games with 7. There's no doubt Trout is still a top-tier player, and I think there's a good argument to be made he's a top 5 AL MVP candidate this year. Next on our good list is arguably the biggest surprise and the most improved on the team, Taylor Ward. Taylor had an incredibly hot start to the beginning of the season and surpassing most of his offensive categories in career numbers pretty early on, and that pretty much solidified him as a starting right fielder throughout the season. And despite coming back down to earth in those middle months of this season, he finished the year hitting .345 in his last 30 games with 6 home runs. So it's important to remember that the former first-round pick is now showing why he was a first-round pick, because he could get as hot as anyone, and finishing the year with a .283 average, 23 home runs, is certainly nothing to laugh at. I think the Angels have found a starting right fielder for the years to come. It is a very good sign that Taylor Ward has come together. Next, I'll talk about my runner-up for the most improved player, Luis Rengifo. Rengifo had another breakout year as the former prospect that the Angels received from Tampa Bay for C.J. Cron slashed a .264 average with 17 home runs and a little over 500 plate appearances. Rengifo got more playing time this year and earned it. He went from a player that was argued as maybe a bench utility player to someone that now could be foreseen as a starting everyday player. Perhaps David Fletcher going down for majority of this season, as well as the struggles of Andrew Velazquez offensively, really was a bright spot to give Rengifo a chance to show what he can do. It's definitely going to be interesting going forward, as I think he should be an option for a starting second baseman. Next, I have to talk about is maybe the most underrated player on the Angels, pitcher Patrick Sandoval. We got him a few years ago in a trade with Martin Maldonado, and he's really done nothing but shine since his time with the Angels. Again, pay no attention to his win-loss record, which I still think is the most overrated thing in all of sports. But he slashed a 2.91 ERA with 148 two-third innings pitched and 151 strikeouts. This guy is a bona fide number 2 starter. A few other ones that I feel are close to the good category that I just want to briefly go by. First is Reed Detmers. Despite throwing the no-hitter early on the season, which maybe is the biggest highlight of the Angels' season, he struggled, but then after he was sent down, came back up, he really seemed to find himself and just looked phenomenal like the first-round pick he was a few years ago. Gives me a lot of hope for the future with Reed Detmers. Jimmy Herget seemed to be the most reliable pitcher in the bullpen. I hope he stays for next year. Jose Suarez seemed to improve, had an ERA under 4 this year. Livan Soto looked really good in the very sample size we got to see him in the last month of the season, hitting over 400. Even with the home run, showing some power, great speed. I'm excited to see him. That's another guy I think should have a shot to start next year in the infield. And no doubt if there's an injury, I think you will see him up very early on, if not a starter. And that concludes my highlights for the good of the Angels season. Again, it didn't go the way we wanted to, but here are some positive highlights. Check back in soon for part 2 of the bad and part 3 of the ugly. As always, thank you for watching.